know these are plants? They're green? Is everything that's green a plant? No, but for terrestrial things, generally, if it's green, it's a plant. There are a few things that are not, and I'll try to show them to you, but almost everything you're seeing here is a plant. So the other thing you'll notice is that some are pretty big. If they're big and off the ground, or even this stuff is off the ground, these are vascular. So they have xylem and phloem, they can get big and get off the ground. Mosses are non-vascular, and we'll look for some as we go. But I want to point out that most of what you're seeing here are vascular. They are seed plants, not ferns. And they are, most of these are angiosperms, they're flowering plants. And I know what you're thinking, how is this a flowering plant? Well, grasses are flowering plants, but they're monocots and they don't make showy flowers. So what you're actually looking at here probably are seeds, fruits that have seeds inside, or they're gonna be later. But you're welcome to, when you dig into here, you might be able to find either the flower or the fruit. It's not easy to tell on these because they're not really attracting animals. They're gonna attract wind. Here we go. So you see how there's those hairs on there? So this thing has not developed yet, but it's probably got an embryo inside here. And that embryo is gonna be packed inside a seed, and the seed's gonna be packed inside a fruit, and the fruit has these hairs on it. And why would this need hairs? Why would the fruit need hairs? No, it's already been pollinated. If it's already been pollinated, that's how you got the embryo. Yeah, it could be sticking to an animal, or it could be caught in the wind. I don't know which one this is adapted for because it's not quite open yet. But here's some that are further along. So let me see if I can find one. These are a little further along. You see how some of these are fuzzy? So these are probably ready to be released from the parent plant and get caught in the wind. But what do you know about what's at the base of that thing?
Seed.
There's a seed. And you might not be able to see it because it's so small, but some seeds are big, some seeds are small, but there's seeds in here. So vascular plant, flowering plant, well, seed plant, flowering plant, and it's a monocot. The way we know it's a monocot is anything that has these parallel veins. Like this is a monocot. And if you were to look at the seeds, there's only one cotyledon, like corn. Has only one cotyledon. Oatmeal, rice, wheat, all the cereals have one cotyledon. Whereas like red beans, you know how you can split it in half? That's two cotyledons. So a dicot, this plant is a dicot, and I can tell because its leaves have netted veins. They're not parallel veins. Okay, so this right here, what would y'all guess this is? First of all, does anybody know what the common name of this kind of plant is?
Fern.
It's not a fern, it's an iris, but there's no flowers on it right now. It'd be easier to tell. But you see how the veins are parallel? Or it's got just a strappy-like leaf, just like these grasses are all monocots. So they are vascular, because they have veins. They are seed plants, they are flowering plants, and they're monocots because their flowers have multiples of 3, so like this iris would, and it's a monocot because they have parallel veins. What kinds of things could you tell me immediately about this? The veins are parallel. What does that mean? Monocot. It's a monocot. So are all monocots seed plants?
Yes.
Yeah. Are all monocots flowering plants? Yes, all monocots and dicots are 2 categories of flowering plants. So you have to get your boxes. What's the biggest box we're putting all these things in? Plants. The next biggest box this belongs to is, well, all the plants are going to be terrestrial. Okay, so what's the next box that we're going to put this plant into is vascular. Okay, and then of the vascular plants, it could be a seed plant or a non-seed plant. What is it? It's a seed plant. Of the seed plants, is it flowering or a gymnosperm?
Gymnosperm.
It's not a gymnosperm. It's a flowering plant. Okay, look, here's some flowers. Yeah, actually, these flowers, these flowers belong to this plant. Okay, so I think that could be something else coming up from the middle, but it does look like this plant. So this is a monocot. It is a seed plant, a flowering plant. Now, when I look at these leaves, do I know if they're diploid or haploid?
No.
Yes, you do. Well, you can put them under a microscope. It'd be hard, but I can tell you. that these are all diploid. What you're seeing here, every cell you see with your eyes is diploid, because the angiosperms, the flowering plants, the dominant generation in the alternation of generations is the sporophyte. This is a sporophyte. Okay? The gametophyte in angiosperms is very reduced, and it's inside the flowers. So if we can find some flowers that are open, maybe we can find, see, you want to come in and get this closer. If you look inside, can y'all see that? Y'all aren't close enough. That's a flower. And so what are those yellow things we see sticking up? That's the yellow structures are anthers, and they make pollen. Okay, so the pollen, each pollen grain contains sperm. So the pollen is the gametophyte. Okay, so you see how the big plant in angiosperms is the sporophyte. And the pollen, the gametophyte, and the ovules that are inside the ovary inside. If we cut it open, you can see there's an ovary down there. Can you see that? There's a little ball looking thing. And if you were to stick that under a microscope, and you can do that, bring that to lab. Stick it under a microscope, cut it open, and you'll see some ovules in there. The ovules are the female gametophyte. So the gametophytes in plants are multicellular. We don't have a multicellular gametophyte in animal. We don't have alternation of generations. Now, y'all might be thinking, oh, well, how's that different than gametes? Well, it's not a gamete. They contain gametes, but they're not gametes. I lost it. Here it is. Is it vascular? Yes, it's big, right? Is it a seed plant? Yes. Is it a flowering plant? Yes. Is it a monocot or a dicot? Dicot. Good. Y'all are getting it. Huh? I'm going to show you, and I'm looking for one now. Okay, this plant is a very famous native plant called American beautyberry, and it is edible, and it's great for wildlife. So, what you're seeing here are the fruit, and what y'all know about fruit is that they are swollen ovaries. So what this used to have a flower, right? So if you look somewhere else on the plant, or earlier in the year, they had some flowers, but it's probably too far along. Everything's been pollinated. They're even ripening, but you can see some of these are white, maybe because they're not ripe yet. Or maybe it's a variation, a genetic variation. But I don't see any that are still flowers. If you see some, let me know. But they're not as stunning as the fruit. But what do you know about the fruit? If we pop this open, what do we see? Seeds. Of course. And sure enough, there are some seeds in there. Now, do you think these seeds have one cotyledon or two? One. What's a cotyledon? That's when the mama plant packages the embryo inside a seed. There are two seed leaves that form. They don't look like leaves at the beginning, but they're called cotyledons. So it's very easy to see if you soak red beans and you split them in half. Those are two cotyledons. You can even see the embryo inside the red beans. I should have made y'all do that. Okay, so those are the seeds. So how do you think this plant disperses its seeds?
Eating them.
Who? Animals eat it. And they deposit the seeds somewhere else. And that's a good way to do it. Oh, by the way, here's another, this is Turk's cap, another famous native plant. What I like about this, I'm going to go ahead and break one up, we have plenty. Okay, this is Turk's cap. What do y'all notice about this plant?
It has flowers.
It's cool.
It has flowers and fruit. Okay, so this one used to be a flower. You agree?
Yes.
Okay, and if you were to pop this open, you would see seeds, and actually they're edible.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, they do. You want to taste it? So, but what is this on the flower? The anthers are stuck to the outside of the pistil, and the pistil is the female part. So the petals are only there to attract the pollinators. But if you dig down, you'll find the ovary. So, effectively, what happens when an insect, trying to get to the bottom here. So if an insect is buzzing around and picks up some pollen from a different flower, a different plant here, and then happens to land, the plant's going to put some nectar at the top to go, hey, come over here, and might drop some pollen right on top. The pollen will germinate. It actually pops open, and the two sperms swim out, and they grow a tube that goes all the way down this neck and then can find its way to the egg. And so the sperm will go and fertilize the egg, and that's what made the embryo that's inside the seed. So one of those two sperm fertilized the egg to make the embryo. The other sperm fertilized another cell that's diploid to make all this fruity endosperm that I'm eating. All the fleshy stuff, the swollen ovary is triploid, not diploid. Okay? So,
Seeds are all different.
yes, all the seeds are different fertilization events. Good. Love that.
That's
great.
Is that for a dicot?
It is a dicot. How'd you know?
Well, I just think because how you opened it and just reminded me of an apple.
Well, it is, but I remember I opened the fruit, not the seed. But if you were to look under a microscope at the seeds and really know what you were looking at, you could see it's a dicot. But how would you know it's a dicot without looking at the seed? The veins, the leaves give it away. And the flower parts are usually in multiples of 5. So if you were to count them, let's see how many it has.
5.
Is it 5? How about that? Isn't that miraculous? Now, how many does a monocot have?
3.
Good. All right. Okay, so in this, we call it a fern garden, but you need to know what's a fern and what's not. So anybody want to say what a fern, which ones are ferns?
This for the spore.
That's right. That's ferns. This is a fern. Is this a fern?
No,
How do you know?
they don't have that many leaves.
Ferns don't make flowers, right? And they don't even make seeds. So you'll never, fern seed is an oxymoron. There's no such thing as a fern seed. So this is a fern, this is a fern, that's a flowering plant.
So ferns are vascular but seedless?
Yay! She got it. Yes, ferns are vascular but seedless. That's right. So remember the boxes? Plants. The next boxes are vascular and non-vascular. All these that you see with your eyes are vascular. I'm still on the hunt for a non-vascular. Let's talk about alternation of generations. So, as you mentioned, there are sporangia that contain spores on the back of these fronds, these fern fronds. And so what you're looking at here, these are all sporophytes. The tissue that you're looking at, most of them are diploid, but there are certain little spots on the back that undergo what kind of cell division to make spores? Meiosis, right? So you're going from diploid to haploid. The only way you can do that is by reductive cell division, which is meiosis. So the spores are in here. So what's a spore? Is it haploid or diploid? Haploid. So why is it not a gamete?
Just to come together.
Right. So a gamete is defined as a haploid cell that is destined for fertilization, destined to join another haploid cell to make a zygote. Okay. Spores are not destined for that. They're destined for mitosis. And when they do mitosis, they make a multicellular plant called a gametophyte. Okay? Now ferns, you can actually see the gametophyte. You saw them when you did sea ferns in lab last semester. You grew some spores on an agar plate, and they actually grew into a haploid gametophyte. I'm not going to go into all the details about what you call all those parts. So don't complain that I'm making the class too hard, because most freshman classes, they actually make you learn the whole life cycle. But my experience is meaningless for y'all. I'd like you to know when you look at this, that this thing makes spores that are haploid cells that are destined for mitosis to make a gametophyte. So here's my question for you. All those other angiosperms we've seen this morning, do they have spores? Yes, but they don't look like this. What's that?
I was just going to say they don't look like that because they're either on the anthers or on the pistils.
Right. The microspores and megaspores are the ones that generate the sperm and egg that will be in the gamete. It'll produce the gametophyte, and from the gametophyte forms the sperm and the egg. So in the angiosperms, the spores are very reduced. They're not visible like this. So it doesn't mean they don't make them. It's just that over evolutionary time, it was advantageous to kind of go for the diploid form. It was for whatever reason. Here, let's talk about alternation of generations. So, as you mentioned, there are sporangia that contain spores on the back of these fronds, these fern fronds. And so what you're looking at here, these are all sporophytes. The tissue that you're looking at, most of them are diploid, but there are certain little spots on the back that undergo what kind of cell division to make spores? Meiosis, right? So you're going from diploid to haploid, and the only way you can do that is by reductive cell division, which is meiosis. So the spores are in here. So what's a spore? Is Is it haploid or diploid?
Haploid.
Haploid. So why is it not a gamete?
Because to come together.
Right. So a gamete is defined as a haploid cell that is destined for fertilization, destined to join another haploid cell to make a zygote. Okay? Spores are not destined for that. They're destined for mitosis. And when they do mitosis, they make a multicellular plant called a gametophyte. Okay? Now ferns, you can actually see the gametophyte. You saw them when you did sea ferns in lab last semester. You grew some spores on an agar plate, and they actually grew into a haploid gametophyte. I'm not going to go into all the details about what you call all those parts. So don't complain that I'm making the class too hard, because most freshman classes, they actually make you learn the whole life cycle. But my experience is meaningless for y'all. I'd like you to know when you look at this, that this thing makes spores that are haploid cells that are destined for mitosis to make a gametophyte. So here's my question for you. All those other angiosperms we've seen this morning, do they have spores? Yes, but they don't look like this. What's that?
I was just gonna say they don't look like that because they're either on the anthers or on the chrysalis.
Right. The microspores and megaspores are the ones that generate the sperm and egg that will be in the gamete. It'll produce the gametophyte, and from the gametophyte forms the sperm and the egg. So in the angiosperms, the spores are very reduced. They're not visible like this. So it doesn't mean they don't make them. It's just that over evolutionary time, it was advantageous to kind of go for the diploid form. It was for whatever reason. I also need to show y'all some gymnosperms, and here's a good one right here. This is a cycad, and if you look inside, so what do we know about gymnosperms? Which boxes do they belong to? Do they belong to plants? Mm-hmm. Yes. Are they vascular or non-vascular? Vascular. They're not this big. That means they must have some pipes inside to get the water and food around. So definitely vascular. Seed or non-seed? Seed. Flowering and non-flowering. So they are gymnosperms, not angiosperms. So they don't make flowers. Do they make fruit? No. So gymnosperms have naked seeds, and if we're lucky, we'll see some. So we won't see flowers, but if you look on the inside, there are all these bracts, and there's some seeds down inside. You can edit that part out. But actually, you can leave it in. I think it's great. So these things, this thing has the embryo in it. So let's see if we can figure out the alternation of generations. What are we looking at? Sporophyte or gametophyte?
We're looking at sporophyte.
We are. So all the cells that you see here are diploid. But is this a seed?
No, it's this.
It is swollen over, but is there a seed in it? Yeah. So this is a seed plant, but it's not a flowering plant. So it's a gymnosperm. It has a naked seed. So there's no fruit. This is the seed. There's no fruit around it. So it doesn't have that double fertilization. So let's see if we can find the embryo side. So does dicot or monocot apply to this plant?
No.
No, why not?
It's not angio.
Right. So she's got her boxes in the right spot. So that's what really helps about y'all doing concept maps. You don't make hierarchical mistakes. I can't open it, but there's an embryo in here, trust me. Okay, so there used to be a, not a flower, but it had a structure called, they have big names, they have weird names, but there are structures, microphylls and megaphylls, that produce the spores, that produce the pollen and eggs. So do these produce pollen and eggs? Yes, they just don't put them in flowers. Cycads don't make cones, but pine trees do, cypress trees do. They make cones. And the cones are the reproductive structures of gymnosperms, of a lot of them, the conifers. This is not a conifer, but cypress trees, pine trees, Christmas trees are all conifers. Okay? This is true moss. This is not Spanish. Spanish moss is not true moss. So this moss is non-vascular. You see how little it is? It can't get very far off the ground. It has no xylem and phloem. The mosses have a dominant gametophyte generation. So most of what you see here is gametophyte, but do y'all see these things sticking up? Y'all gotta come close to see this. Come on, y'all come close. See these things sticking up here? Put your finger on it. There's some here. So the green that's stuck to the wood is the gametophyte. What's sticking up are sporophytes. And they developed from the gametophyte. So the gametophyte is haploid, the sporophyte is diploid. The sporophyte produces spores that are haploid. So if you were to look inside these, you see those little balls at the end? That's where the spores are developing. So the sporophyte is diploid, but the meiosis is happening in each of those structures at the tip. Okay? Glad we found some moss, but hopefully now you'll be able to spot it on your own. Yep.
Good video.
What's this? It's grass, right?
Yes.
Okay, so grasses are flowering plants. So they're vascular seed flowering plants, and these are probably the flowers right now, and they'll develop into fruit. Now, y'all didn't know that was grass flowers, did you?
No.
And when you eat rice, wheat, corn, you're eating the fruit of the flower of those plants. Okay, so those little black things sticking out are probably the anthers. And then some may be fertilized, but that's where the ovules are inside there. Got it? Looks kind of monocot, doesn't it? But it's a dicot. Like this.
R.I.P.
This is our non-vascular moss, and most of what we're seeing is the gametophyte. I'm not seeing any. There's a few sporophytes over here, but that's what that is. Non-vascular, it's photosynthetic, it has alternation. So my goal for you guys, by taking this class, it's very important to me that you see biology outside the textbook. You should see it everywhere you live and everywhere you look.